The year was 1975. A woman was arrested and locked away for 30 days, but when she stepped back into the world, something was horribly wrong. Her little girl was gone. No trace, no explanation. Years passed, then decades, and the child remained lost. But when the truth finally surfaced, it was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. She hadn't just vanished. She had been taken. Her identity erased, her fate placed in the hands of a man with deeply sinister intentions. In a plot twist no one could have ever imagined, here's how things unfolded. Born on June 17, 1943 in Barnesville, Georgia, Franklin Delano Floyd was the youngest of 5 children in a family already struggling to survive. His father, a cotton mill worker with a drinking problem, died just a year later from organ failure at 32. That left his mother Della, widowed at 28, completely broke and raising 5 kids alone with nowhere else to go. She moved in with her parents, but by 1946, they had enough. Overwhelmed, they forced Della and her children out, leaving them with no home, no money, and no options. The county child welfare agency had a solution, but not one that brought comfort. Floyd and his siblings were sent to the Georgia Baptist Children's Home in Hapeville. For Floyd, it was a brutal existence, bullied relentlessly for being feminine. He later claimed he suffered constant assaults from the other boys. The staff offered no protection. In fact, they were just as cruel. When he was caught in an act of self-exploration, they didn't just scold him. They shoved his hand into scalding water. By 16, Floyd had already turned to crime. He broke into a Sears department store in Inglewood, California, looking for a gun. But before he could escape, police swarmed the scene. A shootout erupted, and Floyd was shot in the stomach. He survived emergency surgery and spent a year in a youth institution. It wasn't enough to keep him in line. In 1961, he violated parole by fleeing to Canada. Then came the crime that changed everything. In May 1962, Floyd was back in Georgia, working at Atlanta International Airport. A month later, he kidnapped a 4-year-old girl from a bowling alley and assaulted her in the woods. The crime was so heinous that there was no escaping the consequences. He was convicted of kidnapping and child molestation and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in Georgia State Prison. But Floyd had no intention of serving his time. That November, he was transferred to Milledgeville State Hospital for psychiatric evaluation. Less than a year later, during what should have been a routine medical trip, he made his move. He escaped, slipping away unnoticed. Days later, he resurfaced in Macon, where he robbed a Citizens and Southern National Bank of $6,000. It didn't take long for authorities to catch up. He was arrested, sentenced again, and sent to the Federal Reformatory in Chillicothe, Ohio. In 1974, Floyd transformed himself into someone new. This time, he was Brandon Williams. Under this alias, he met Sandra Brandenburg, a mother of 4, struggling to keep her family together. She was crying at a North Carolina truck stop, terrified that she was about to lose her children. Floyd saw an opportunity. He had the perfect solution. She would marry him, and he would take care of everything. Desperate, she agreed. They moved to Dallas, Texas. Then, in 1975, Sandra was arrested for passing bad checks. She was sentenced to just 30 days in jail, but that was enough time for Floyd to make his move. When she was released, she returned home to find an empty house. Floyd had taken her children and disappeared. 2 of her daughters were eventually found, placed in the care of a church-run social services group, but her youngest son, Philip, was missing for decades. In 2019, a man came forward believing he was the lost child. A DNA test proved him right. Philip had been privately adopted in North Carolina. But the fate of her oldest daughter, Suzanne Savakis, was far more disturbing. What happened to Suzanne? Floyd decided to take one of the girls and raise her as his own. But what he called a rescue was something else entirely. From that moment on, her life was no longer her own. They moved constantly, always changing names, slipping through the cracks, and never staying in one place long enough for anyone to ask questions. Sometimes they posed as father and daughter, and other times as husband and wife. But no matter what they told the world, the truth was buried beneath a series of identities that never lasted. In Atlanta, she was Sharon Marshall, a bright student with a future, a girl who graduated high school with honors while hiding the weight of the life she was trapped in. She got pregnant by a teenage boyfriend, and Floyd made sure the baby was put up for adoption, reminding her that the past didn't matter. By 1988, they were in Tampa, Florida, living in a mobile home, and Sharon had another child, a little boy she named Michael. The birth certificate listed Floyd as the grandfather. While Floyd stayed home with Michael, Sharon started working at Mons Venus, a well-known nude club on Dale Mabry Highway, and that's where she met Cheryl Ann Comesso. Cheryl was just 18, ambitious, and always looking for a way up. She wanted more, wanted the kind of life where money was easy and admiration followed her wherever she went. Floyd saw the way she worked, the way she played the game, and he had his own thoughts about her. He called her a hustler, said she was a master at getting what she wanted. But there was something else beneath the surface, something that made her dangerous to be around. Sharon and Cheryl became friends, but it wasn't just friendship. There was competition, a silent back and forth that neither of them acknowledged, but both felt. Cheryl had breast implants, so Sharon got them too. They took trips to Fort Lauderdale together, where they could make thousands in just a night, catering to wealthy men who had more money than patience. But Cheryl also started spending time with Floyd. And soon enough, neighbors noticed. He called her his girlfriend, took her to the beach, filmed her, recorded moments that seemed casual but had a purpose only he understood. Then, in April 1989, everything changed. Cheryl disappeared. And soon, Floyd fled once again. A strange ending. Floyd and Sharon had been planning a trip to the Carolinas, but when they were supposed to return, something wasn't right. A neighbor looked out the window and saw a man rushing away from the mobile home, jumping into a pickup truck and speeding off. Moments later, flames engulfed the house. By the time the fire was put out, there was barely anything left. Clothes, appliances, furniture, all gone. Investigators knew it was arson. The stove had been turned on, the gas line loosened, and combustibles placed on the burner. But Floyd was nowhere to be found. A week later, he called a neighbor, asked her to burn a few letters, then reached out to his landlord, already aware he was being looked at as a suspect. He wanted his deposit back. Then, without warning, he and Sharon were in New Orleans, standing in front of a judge using names they had taken from tombstones. They got married, and Floyd had his justification. Marrying her gave him legal rights over Michael. That same year, Sharon had another baby, a girl, but the child was placed for adoption. And by the time 1990 arrived, they were in Tulsa. Sharon started working at Passions, a strip club with a reputation as worn down as the carpet inside. And it was there that cracks began to show. She started seeing a bouncer, spending more time away from home, and confiding in friends about things she never should have had to live through. She was afraid of Floyd, afraid of what would happen if she ever left. And when she found a life insurance policy in her name, the fear only grew. She started saving money, slipping it to a friend for safekeeping, trying to carve out a way to escape. But she was running out of time. In April 1990, Floyd took her on a 2-hour drive to Oklahoma City, supposedly for a doctor's appointment. They checked into a motel, and that night, she left, crossed the highway, walked toward a diner, and never made it back. Hours later, she was found unconscious on the side of the road, the victim of what investigators called a hit and run. But something about it didn't sit right. She was in the hospital for several days before she passed away, and when her friends in Tulsa tried to arrange a funeral, Floyd hesitated. They insisted, raised the money themselves, and in the process they found something strange. Her employment records listed her maiden name as Tadlock from Alabama. Her boss tracked down a number thinking she could inform her family of her passing. But when she called, the response was chilling. The real Sharon Tadlock had been dead for 20 years. Secrets begin to unravel. The police got involved, and by the time her funeral took place, detectives were waiting. They blocked the exits, took Floyd in, and soon discovered he was a fugitive. He was sent back to federal prison, and Michael, now 2 years old, was placed in foster care. Floyd didn't stay locked up for long. Once he was out, he used the money from Sharon's life insurance to fight for custody of Michael, even though blood tests confirmed he wasn't the boy's biological father. He argued that he was the only father Michael had ever known, but the case dragged on, and in the meantime, a couple named Ernest and Merle Bean stepped in. After 4 years, Michael was a part of their family, and they tried to prepare him for the possibility that Floyd might come back. In the end, they were right to be worried. Strange things started happening. Their dog barked at the woods outside their house night after night. One evening, while Merle and the kids were swimming in the pool, she heard something. Movement beyond the trees. What was really going on? Turns out, Floyd had been watching them for weeks. Then, on a September morning in 1994, he walked into Michael's school, shook hands with the principal, and calmly explained that he needed help getting his son back. However, here's what complicated things. Floyd had a gun. Together they walked down the hall, collected Michael from his first-grade classroom, and left, as if nothing was wrong. They drove to the woods behind the Beans' house, and there, Floyd bound the principal, left him taped to a tree with a key nearby, and vanished with Michael. For weeks, the entire country searched for the boy, but he was never seen again. Floyd was arrested months later in Kentucky, and while he admitted to taking Michael, he claimed it was out of love. He said the boy had been mistreated in foster care, that he had to protect him. Decades later, Floyd would finally confess to what he did to Michael, but not before other secrets began to reveal themselves. Camesso, Sharon Tadlock's friend from before, had disappeared in 1989. But in 1995, a discovery shook the quiet streets of Pinellas County, Florida. A landscaper, working along the edge of Interstate 275, stumbled upon skeletal remains, bones half buried in the underbrush. Initially listed as a Jane Doe, the identity of the victim wouldn't be revealed for over a year. Only then did an archaeologist piece together the grim story, confirming that the woman had met a violent end, blunt force trauma followed by 2 fatal gunshots to the head. But that wasn't the end of it. Floyd and Suzanne Savakis had already drawn the attention of investigators. A witness had come forward, recounting an argument between Floyd and Comesso, outside the very club where both women worked as exotic dancers. The confrontation had escalated quickly. Floyd, in a fit of rage, accused Comesso of betraying Savakis by reporting her for misrepresenting her income, resulting in Savakis losing her government benefits. What followed was a punch to Comesso's face, witnessed by a coworker, leaving a clear trail of animosity. Soon after, both Floyd and Savakis vanished. A fire, too perfect in its execution, ravaged the trailer they had been staying in, and arson ruled intentional. The fire consumed everything: furniture, memories, evidence, leaving behind nothing but ashes. But the truth was still lurking, hidden in plain sight. In March 1995, a mechanic working in Kansas found something strange. As he inspected a truck he had bought at auction, he discovered a large envelope wedged between the truck bed and gas tank. Inside it were 97 photographs. Most were of a woman, bound, beaten, and barely recognizable. The police traced the truck back to Floyd, who had stolen it in Oklahoma in 1994, only to abandon it months later in Texas. The photos, raw and brutal, were enough to cause concern. Some of them depicted a woman wearing clothing similar to that found on Comesso's remains. A closer look revealed injuries in the photos that lined up perfectly with those on Comesso's skull. The same furniture visible in the photos matched items that had been inside the trailer Floyd and Savakis had set on fire. It was undeniable. Floyd had left behind more than just traces of his violence. He had left evidence. As the investigation deepened, the photographs told an even darker story, one of years of abuse and exploitation. Some images, chilling in their innocence, depicted Savakis herself, starting from childhood, in sexually explicit poses. The photos dated back to when she was as young as 4 years old. This discovery was enough to uncover horrors that had festered out of sight for years. In 2001, as he awaited trial for Comesso's murder, a judge, Nancy Lay, ruled that he was incompetent to stand trial. This decision was quickly contested by Floyd, who fought to assert his own mental stability. Months passed, and the decision was reversed. Floyd was once again deemed fit to face trial. The court would not be merciful. The evidence was damning. The photographs alone painted a gruesome picture of the horrors Floyd had committed, but the details of his confession sealed his fate. He was convicted of first-degree murder, and in a courtroom filled with silent tension, the judge sentenced him to death. In a chilling admission that would shake the investigation, Floyd finally confessed in 2014 to the murder of Michael. He claimed that he had disposed of the boy's body somewhere along Interstate 35. A search of the area yielded no results, but local authorities believed wild hogs had consumed the remains, forever erasing any hope of finding the body. But several other aspects of Floyd's case remain in the dark. He always refused to give clear answers, expected to die behind bars, and when asked about the truth, he only said one thing: "I'm not obligated to clear up any mysteries." He eventually died on death row on June 23, 2023, at the age of 79, due to natural causes. The thing that sticks with me about this story is how many deaths could have been avoided if Floyd hadn't been allowed to escape again and again. that certainly wouldn't be possible now. Or would it? Tell me what you think in the comments section. That's all for this week, so stay safe, take care of the people you love, and we'll see you soon on Fridays with Tony.